So keeping like frogs and toads as pets and like the whole pet trade and the industry of it versus conservation. I was just curious to know like where you stood with that, or like what your thoughts were on that, because we've had some great conversations back and forth about, if people, what where people stand, like what do they support, what are they against, and what do they think about it, like if they can coexist.
Oh, if it can coexist.
Yeah.
Uh, that's the question. Yeah. Well, I mean, of course it can coexist. I think that, you know, I mean, I don't have to tell you, there's a lot of bad actors out there in the pet trade. They do horrible things, and that's gets a lot of attention. It's horrible. I would never support any of that, though there are other people that for sure focus on it very differently and more sustainably, and are it's a trade that it revolves on these animals, and so that's there's always going to be people that are against it, and I understand that. I can say for myself, I didn't even know when I was in college, I didn't even know the field of herpetology existed at all. I had no sense of that. But I did have a pet Pac-Man frog, and he got sick, and that sick frog is what led me. Someone told me there was an actual frog guy in the basement of the biology building, and I went to see him, and that's what changed my life. And so I personally, I didn't start off in the conservation field. I went to school to do biological research on amphibians because that's where my interest is. It's just that the amphibians they're disappearing, and I'm a father, and it's harder for my son to find a frog than it was for me. That's profoundly sad. Like going to the sites where I used to find amphibians, and they're not there, they're not there in the same numbers. That makes you sad when you're a father. And I've I've shifted my focus more and more to conservation because of what I feel is the necessity of the all hands on deck, situation. And so I kind of lost my train of thought, but hopefully you got where I was
It
going with
was
that.
going good, man.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I was
But
following it.
yeah, so it's just, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sure I'll finish that if you on the next question.
That's okay.
How many different species are you currently working with at the Amphibian Foundation? Do you have any stuff that's pretty much just uh, in situ stuff, or you have kind of a captive component to most of the projects?
Um, Thank you. Let me think. Most of our projects have some degree of ex situ. The gopher frog is a project we've been working on for a very long time, and we are rearing an ex situ population of adults, but we've been predominantly doing assisted metamorphosis with them for the last 12 years. So we collect eggs with our partners, we rear them up, and then through metamorphosis, and then release the froglets. We've been doing that for a long time. There's a gopher frog there. Look how sweet they are. And so that's Georgia's rarest frog, and they are a very uptight species. And so we reared 45 frogs to adulthood in three different breeding groups in the outdoor mesocosms, and then someone came and stole them.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
all 45.
See, that
And
goes
so
back
we
to the last question.
Mhm, mhm.
That's tough.
And so, yeah, that is tough. I hope they knew what they were doing. And so we had to start over. That set us back. It takes a couple, 2, 3 years to rear gopher frogs to adulthood because, we are right in Atlanta. Gopher frogs are a Georgia species, but not an Atlanta species, and their call is obnoxiously loud. And so I was really looking forward to people being like, "What the hell is that?" Just have these snoring gopher frogs. I love them. Anyway, we'll get there eventually. And the reason why we're doing that is because, like I said, we've been collecting eggs with, Georgia DNR and all our partners for many years. And the source ponds are having less and less eggs. We don't want to collect eggs from the source ponds. We want to produce our own at this point, because that's another species that is declining. Anyway, they're really spastic as well. So yeah, they're interesting. There are during the summer, towards the end of the summer, that's when we start getting them go through metamorphosis. It's usually very syncopated, so a lot of them metamorphose at once, and it's pandemonium.
Let me ask you a question about this. So this, from my understanding, is the state amphibian still the green tree frog?
Yes.
Have you ever considered reaching out to somebody and saying maybe this would be a good candidate?
I don't want to slight the green tree frog, but I will say that I was part of a petition to get a gopher frog license plate for the state of Georgia, and they didn't go for it.
Darn.
That was a good pun.
Very...
They didn't go for it. Gopher. I get that. I saw that.
Nice one. Yeah.
The reason,
I'm sure you understand. Most people
Yeah.
don't really give a crap about amphibians, and that's another reason why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Are the gopher frog and the dusky gopher frog the same thing, or is that like a subspecies, or?
It's a different species entirely.
A different species entirely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, huh? It's a little group of frogs, the gophers and the crawfish frogs.
Yeah.
And they're really sensitive to what we've done to the environment. So they're all kind of declining in their own ways. Though I think Florida still has a pretty stable gopher frog population.
This is okay. It's called the Mississippi gopher frog. There we go.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's a unique looking. That looks almost like a mix of like a bullfrog and I don't know. It looks like it has warts like a toad. It's still similar
Kind
to
of like a East Asian bullfrog almost, but with more pattern on it.
It definitely looks unique.
And you see it's Savosis, and it's a totally different species.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that one's also endangered, isn't it?
I think it's even more endangered.
Thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because I've definitely heard about conservation programs for these fellas as well. Detroit Zoo. There we go. That's one of my local places. So.
Okay, and the Memphis Zoo. That's another place that I believe has.
Yeah, that's right. I applied for their internship with that project once. Actually, unfortunately, I didn't get it, but I looked into that program a lot.
The Memphis Zoo is the zoo that donated the money for us to build our gopher frog mesocosms at the Amphibian Foundation. Nice. So I'm glad I had a little chance to call that out because that was really nice.
That's great.
Yeah. And they came down and collected sperm from our frogs.
So how well does that, I guess, like, do they have to use that right away? Or is that something that, like, mammals or whatever, you can, like, chill it and save it for later? Because I've always thought that seems like kind of a potentially underexplored means for preserving genetic diversity, like being able to transfer around and save, like, amphibian sperm samples rather than having to transfer whole entire frogs and potentially risk disease or risk mortality just due to stress, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, cryobanking has been going on for a long time. So I've given sperm many times from different species, and then I'm proud to say, in a way, I guess I'm a sperm donor for frogs. That sounds funny.
You house a sperm bank, yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the 2005 Panamanian rescue mission that resulted in the Rapp's fringed limb tree frog going extinct. That final frog, Tuffy, was cryopreserved as well. And so
Mhm.
we had been prepped in how to prepare that specimen prior to his demise, which, you know, mercifully, he died 6 weeks after the garden closed the program there, and I left. So I didn't get to spend those final weeks with him, but I was familiar with the process and the importance. You know, I don't really see us getting to the point where we're going to bring back a species that's gone extinct through this kind of technology. I mean, maybe if we spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, we can get back to the point where we were, where we have one left. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not. I'm pessimistic on that. You know, but it costs a lot of money to not to collect the sperm. That seems like a pretty straightforward process, but to store it
Yeah.
indefinitely and you
Mm.
know,
Yep.
it's and you know, there's not a lot of frog money, not a lot of frog conservation money out there, I can tell you. And so we'll see.
Yeah, I learned about that in my undergrad. I was researching different methods, and that was a newer thing that they were doing. It was back in like 1819, maybe early 20, and I was reading sources that were just coming out from 16, 17 with cryopreservation of the sperm. And I don't know, is it San Jose or San Diego? Somebody was really getting up to date with that, or they were like leading the way. One of the
I think
zoos, I
San
thought.
Diego Zoo has the frozen zoo.
Yeah.
That's like the big bank of frozen genetic material.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I read a lot about the San Diego Zoo, so that makes sense. With the red-legged frog and the yellow-legged frog and those projects out there and others. But yeah, cryopreservation. So that's interesting. So you don't necessarily see the future with I guess these scientists claiming they can bring animals back from extinction. So you're kind of pessimistic on de-extinction.
Oh, well, I am less pessimistic about them developing to bring something back. I think that their humans probably really want to do that, probably more than anything to appease some guilt. But I don't think that I don't think that it's going to have a place in conservation. I could be way off, but like, you know, we're thinking about things like how are you going to produce, how are you going to clone a genetically viable population that's going to be able to exist. You know, I remember when they tried to bring back Rio batrachus, you know, the gastric brooding frog,
Yeah.
and they
Mhm.
got some cells to divide and stuff, and how exciting that was. But you know, we're just gonna have one gastric brooding frog, so that it wouldn't be extinct for a short while, and then I guess it would be extinct again. It just doesn't feel very, you know, when we did the initial models for captive propagation of flatwood salamanders, in order to have any impact at all, we were going to have to produce 2,800 and release 2,800 larvae a year. You know, and so that, you know, that, I don't know. I just can't see how cloning could produce that that many genetically distinct, viable animals, or where you could really make any impact on that. So
Well, I'm kind
sorry.
of thinking about that sort of thing from the perspective of like stuff that's already here, like given in the pet trade and stuff. There's some species that they used to be regularly imported, and that's no longer the case due to new import laws, stuff like that. Like the pretty much anything that's from Australia. There's species like, you know, your white tree frog is a very popular starter kind of amphibian pet. The bumblebee walking toad, I've got some of those. Those were another one that it took so long for people to kind of wrap their heads around how to properly maintain them that now there's a pretty genetically limited population in the US. And it's not that any of these things are extinct in the wild, but you're not supposed to be bringing in any new new blood due to laws. But if there was some way to kind of get around that sort of thing, if it were legal to go to country of origin, just collect sperm, something like that, and then be able to preserve that enough to get it into whatever breeding facilities in other countries, other continents that have that species. That would be maybe a way to keep your populations healthy for longer, kind of thing.
Well, never heard anything like that. That sounds interesting.
Me neither, but I think it'd be interesting if that was a thing that was ever possible to do.
So I'm thinking about this land. You guys are also you just mentioned about how many viable offspring you'd have to put out for the salamander, but you also, I know this is a big thing that skeptics in a lot of literature critique. They say, well, these captive breeding programs, and I'm for them, by the way, but there's a lot of articles that I had to read in one of the papers I did where they say that unless you're preserving land, it's not as effective. I mean, what is there a strategy for you guys with purchasing land or conserving it? Like, how are you guys going about saving or creating the habitat for these at-risk species?
How did you come to that number as well? What kinds of calculations went into that?
Oh, great. Let me just say first that whoever read, wherever you read that is correct. And then, Amelia, to answer your question, in 2014, I was invited to participate in what's called a structured decision-making workshop, which is a federally sponsored conservation program. And I was invited into this meeting. It was a week long, and it was, so 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and it was about a dozen of us. I was invited along with the San Antonio Zoo and some researchers from the University of Missouri. Ray Semlich, who has now passed away, but he was an amazing salamander ecologist, focusing predominantly on ring salamanders. And Susan Walls from the USGS. She is one of the heads in the Florida Army, the Amphibian Research and Monitoring Initiative, Army. And it's great people. And we got together to think about, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, to think about if it was necessary to start this assurance colony. And so the structured decision-making framework is really structured. And we laid out a problem, and was discussed and measured, because also present in the room were a half dozen statistical modelers, and there were a bunch of screens up on the wall. And basically, we were doing some predictive analysis through a whole bunch of complex, decision trees. And so it culminated. It was horrible, and I had a headache, but it was very rewarding, and the clarity that we gained at the end of that week was very helpful in guiding the next couple of years of conservation action. That's where that number came up. When we weighed the cost of different conservation projects and with the capacity to carry them out and what type of impact they could have on the wild populations, that 2,800 number came from AF starting a captive colony for cingulatum, San Antonio Zoo starting a captive colony for Bishop Eye, and us rearing these water-stressed eggs until we got about 100 adults or 50 breeding pairs. And so that's how that kind of established the initial goals for the project. Does that answer your question with too much detail?
No, that was a great answer.
Okay.
You always,
Thank you.
You hear those kind of numbers like that, and it's like, I've
Where'd it come
always
from?
wondered what goes into, figuring out those numbers, because without having some kind of a goal in mind, you're kind of floundering sometimes, but.
Yeah. And thank you. And then Aaron, just to, I wouldn't have even approved this project unless we had a map to getting these animals back out into the wild safely. And so because this is one small part of this overall recovery plan, the majority of the recovery plan, and so that's a federal plan that you can look up in the register. Anybody can look it up. So that the majority of that is focused on restoring and maintaining habitat. And so there are a few places that are starting to look pretty good, even places that haven't had detections in 15 years because the habitat got so poorly degraded, has now been restored to the point where it looks like it could support salamanders again. And so that's super encouraging because we're not ready. We're not at the point where we're producing large numbers. The animals that we produce, we still have in the lab because we're trying to make sure that they can become healthy adults. And I'm happy to say that our F1s are showing secondary sexual characteristics right now. And so that's a really good sign. Doesn't look like we're going to be able to breed them this year, but hopefully next year we'll be able to produce the first F2 generation of cingulated.
Congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
That's incredible. The reason why I bring that up is because that's kind of the idea I had about like creating artificial pools next to these vernal pools that dry up or places that are deforested to try to nudge the animals to go to a new location that's nearby where there's still resources, because I don't have the money to go out and buy this land or even coax these private landowners, hey, like, don't do that. So I could just create satellite places for them to go. And we have seen some impacts of that positively. I also wanted to ask you something. So are you familiar with a GIS project of the frogs of Cobb County? Were you involved in that at all, or are you aware of it at all?
No, it's not current, right? It's
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
It
I did.
happened.
I do remember that. Yeah.
I'm pulling that up real quick here. We had this as a model. I bring this up because our nonprofit is looking towards going in a direction where we start creating our own database and not necessarily having it so people can go directly to where they are. I think we would do more like polygons, but the reason why I bring this up is because we have people on here that talk about GIS and drones. Like, I'm a drone pilot, so I see you're looking. Is it not
Yeah.
zoomed in enough, or do you want me to zoom in more?
No, it's fine. I was just looking
Okay.
at it.
But I guess my question is, how important is some of the cutting edge technology with doing these assessments of habitat, for these different animals? Are you guys, invested in like these databases? Are you creating any to kind of figure out, I guess, where these populations are?
Well, we have USGS as partners, so they're doing this kind of stuff, and they have this type of data. We provide this type of data to them, if that makes sense, for
Yeah.
Singulatum.
Yeah. It's I mean, that's the greatest group you could have behind you is the USGS.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yes.
they're very passionate about this stuff.
And they're good at it, and
Oh
they're
yeah,
super nerds.
exactly. We
Yeah.
won't have that kind of benefit, but I'm in these classes and I've been just networking really well to meet people that can help us to create these types of maps. But this is pretty awesome. I wasn't sure if you worked on it or if you just were aware of it.
Yeah, does it have the contact on here? Because I think it's this guy, Mike Kale, and so I think this project has a
Yep,
yeah,
there
Mike
he
Kale.
is.
Yeah, he left there. He's no longer at Cobb County.
So that's how you
But
found out about it, from a friend.
well, no, he reached out to me when he was starting this project, and I fully encouraged him, and I thought it was great. Looks like there's a typo right there, but
I don't know if we want to
Sudeik.
bring attention to it.
Yeah, okay, never mind. But anyway, yeah, but so that's how I know that this project here is a few years old at least, but it's great. Look at it; it's really
Yeah,
cool.
it's really interactive. It'll get people excited to see. It's funny, he has Elliot Lang down here. Yeah,
Yeah,
this guy, he wrote a
of
book
course.
about all of their calls and where they're found,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
just interesting.
that's a very famous book. I love that book with all the recordings. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
he's a phenomenal audio. I don't know what you want to consider him. I guess author and creator.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
great guy.
Yeah, I just thought I'd just bring that up because I thought that was in your backyard or somewhere like close to you.
It's actually it's on the outskirts of Atlanta, but on the opposite side of Atlanta from where I am. So I'm sure it has the same communities there.
Yeah. Um, so another question I have, you talked about this a little bit, but I think this would be interesting for you to, even if you need to get into the weeds for this type of a conversation, but you mentioned about working with the DNR and creating these populations like these assurance colonies, and I would assume you probably have model candidates as well, like the southern toad we talked about and other creatures. But how do you go through that process? Like how did they approach you and say, hey, other than the flatwood salamander, did they approach you and say, hey, we want you to have these creatures and create these programs, or like did you have to get AZA accredited? Like how does that work to get that off the ground?
I don't know anything about AZA accreditation, so but I can say that clearly for us, it has not been a requirement. But I say, because we had this project going with the flatwood salamanders, we already had a relationship with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Georgia DNR, and so it's all grown very naturally because especially when I go back to the Sea Park that I mentioned. I think I mentioned Sea Park before we started recording. So
Yes.
I'll just reiterate Southeast Partners in Amphibian Reptile Conservation. It's a Sea Park, SEPARC.org. And that's just the Southeast region of this national park network. And so at the Sea Park, it's a free conservation network. And in the States, there's a NEAT Park, Northeast, Southwest Park, Midwest Park, everywhere a park. So you're looking at Sea Park right here. And so this is just a great network, and it's state and federal agents and academics and graduate students and undergrads. So it's a really great network, and it puts you in regular contact with the people that are, working for the state that are really passionate about their herpetofauna and what needs conservation. And so these are the people that would need to permit you for anything that you're doing. So they're really great people to know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, give them a shout out. And then if you go to Park Place, PARC place.org, that's the national website there. .org, yeah.
I shouldn't have put a space. That's all right. Don't judge
That's all
me,
right.
people watching this.
No, you found it. Yeah. And so this is the national site there. And so it has all of the regions plus some of the national task teams. So it's a really great way to get connected with conservation on reptiles and amphibians. I also, I should mention, I feel like I've done a really good job shouting those organizations out, but AF is also a great place for people that are looking to take their first steps into conservation and into amphibians. So that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on. So I just wanted to at least mention that. So I think I mentioned we had 30 staff, but we have about 100 volunteers. So it's really a lot of great opportunities there. Okay, so you got the website up there. If you go to get.amphibious.af, so get amphibious AF, that'll take you to all of our current opportunities. Yeah, amphibious. Yeah, you got .af.
All
There
right.
you go. There you go.
There
And
we go.
that'll take you to the opportunities page there. And so that has opportunities we train everyone. We don't expect anyone to come in with any prior experience. And we just do a lot of educational programs. We have about 40 volunteers on our collections team. So those are the ones that are taking care of our education collections of amphibians and reptiles. And so there's some really good positions there, like frog botanist. We try to create titles for jobs that are going to look good on people's resumes and CVs in the future. So we have lizard transportation specialists and things like that, things that'll really stand out on a resume. But the biggest thing is our conservation research bridge program, which is, I think you just saw it down at the bottom there. Let me see a little bit. Yeah. So if you are looking for hands-on mentored research and career developing experiences, we have the Conservation Research Bridge Program. So that's a gap year program that we have people come from all over the country to spend 1 to 3 semesters with us to just get really hands-on in conservation research and get out into the field. Those are the folks I mentioned earlier that were out and detected spotted salamanders this morning. They are doing the parts of my job that I used to love that I don't no longer have time to do because I'm writing reports and answering emails. They're the ones that are out doing the cool stuff. And it's just a really great program, and it provides a really unique experience that resonates for a very small, specific group of people. And so that is, worth shouting out. And so I thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, no problem.